Hi everyone, today let's talk about the upcoming inflation data and the effects on the upcoming rate cut for September. Then we'll get into the usual data and charts. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So inflation data comes out this week, and let's take a look at what it could mean for markets. They say the inflation data could determine next week's inflation policy, and that's what we've been saying for a while, but let's see what they have to say here. They say with the rate cut basically settled at this point, the cut is expected on September 18th. The question is it 25 or is it 50 basis points? The consensus for inflation is a 0.2. We talked about that in the previous. We also want to see that core come down. The headline number is expected to drop to 2.6, which I think could be very bullish. We're at a 2.9 right now, waiting to see that core number come down a little bit more, which is at 3.2. Usually this headline number kind of leads markets. Oil and gas prices have come down a little bit, so we're expecting that headline number to come down based on that. So 2.6 is pretty low. I think it's certainly possible at this point. We've also seen pretty weak jobs data, 135,000, down from 255,000, just about 100% in my book. They also say there's a 29% chance of a more aggressive half a point cut. So if you add those up, that's a 100% chance of a rate cut. I think this 29% is probably fair. A quarter percentage, honestly, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think 25% is good. If they cut by 50 basis points, I think that signals to markets that the economy is actually weaker than we think it is. But maybe if this inflation data comes down more than forecasted, we could see that 50 basis point cut. But again, it seems unlikely. Looking at fear and greed, we stepped to a 40 from a 42, so continuing to step down despite slightly bullish markets. Seeing that step down a little bit here. Again, momentum, you can see that continuing to trend just a little bit higher, but still fear in markets. Strength and breadth continue to hover in greed. I think breadth actually did come down a little bit yesterday, so we'll see what that looks like on the charts. Put-call ratio continuing to elevate towards that 0.9 area, so markets are forecasting something in my opinion. And then volatility, still neutral, did come down a little bit more here today, but you can see this overall trend is slightly bullish, so still expecting one more spike at least. And then safe haven demand back into fear after we saw that really high number. You don't see that super often, a 10% number on this. Doesn't go back super far, just October of 23, but the last time we were anywhere near that was November of 23, which ended up being a very powerful bottom. So something to consider there. And then looking at junk bonds, no changes, still extreme fear. Looking at seasonality, you can see we're still in this bullish period up until the 13th. That seems to be coming to fruition. Once we hit that, we're looking at more sideways choppy to bearish price action, which again fits with my overall thesis. Moving over to the economic calendar, there was really nothing for today. Tomorrow, of course, we have that CPI data. And then at the end of the day, we have that 10-year note auction. That'll obviously be affected by what we see in the morning. And then anything you hold into the evening tomorrow will get hit with that PPI data. My guess is that'll be in line with CPI. So whatever happens there will probably get exacerbated by that PPI data. And then you have federal budget, federal balance sheet. And then for Friday, really not much, just some Michigan data. Again, that's going to propagate off of that CPI data in my opinion. Moving over to Max Pain, we're still sitting basically on top of it. It did move down slightly and stock price went up slightly. Call wall is 560, which is a lot higher from here. 550 is your first put wall. We're kind of on top of that in this mid-range already. Put call ratio continues to stay very high, which is concerning, right? So if you're trying to play to the bear side, that put call ratio is putting it bottom in markets. There's just a ton of puts. Remember, a lot of these are super far out of the market, but it still affects markets and usually props them up, at least in the short term. Moving over to the charts, looking at the S&Ps, you can see we did get a positive day, 0.45. Momentum, step to bullish. Interesting. Not a lot. Something like this where you get a little bit of a pullback, hit the 21 and then drop. That could be the exact same setup that we're looking for here. 21 EMA sitting right at the trend line, 9 EMA sitting right there. We also got the cross here today, so the 9 is below the 21 as well as VWAP. Finding a little bit of hesitation there at the 55 EMA, which is at 55.02. But again, you have that swing to bullish. That should give you a little bit more follow through, potentially a retest of the 21, one more day of bullish, touch that level, get a big wick rejection from there. If CPI is the catalyst that pushes us into that zone, it could be quite violent. Aggressive push up, throw big wicks, hit these wicks back from the 4th and 5th, touch that zone, and then reject off back to this lowest trend, which is at 54.47 or so. If this zone breaks, obviously there's a ton of downside potential, just like we saw here. Once it broke here, big move down to the next level once that broke all the way down to this next level. So these trends are clearly important. Looks like we're getting a retest here potentially tomorrow. And then looking at that shorter time frame here, you can see we're kind of generating this channel. On the short time frames, we did get above the 9, the 21, and the 55 here today. We were above them slightly yesterday, and then today we definitely pushed above them. Couldn't quite get to the resistance at 550.12. Now we're selling just a little bit after hours. Momentum not super great, so not a lot of conviction in this up move. I do think it's going to resume to the downside, but of course the question is, when are we going to push through this, push through the 55 and maybe hit these longer term EMAs on the hourly? Certainly possible. That's at 552.57, and then the 200 above that at 554.73. Moving over to the 4-hour chart on the Tasty charts here, you can see that upper ATR resistance is at 551.68. So again, looking for a test of that tomorrow. Finding a little bit of resistance in here. Still think we're going to reject off this. It kind of looks like a bear flag, to be honest. Move down, consolidation, grinding price action. Just looking for that big test, and then we'll see that bigger sell to those lowest ATR bands, which based on this 4-hour chart would put your price target down around 535.50. Moving over to the NASDAQ, pretty similar thesis. Obviously, the levels are very different, but looking for a retest of this trend here, which is at 18,993, which based on that move is about another 1% higher from current price. Momentum also stepping to bullish. Same as yesterday, looking for a retest of that SMA, which is trending lower. So again, pull back in time, one more day potentially. Remember, it is always possible that this is going to break through, similar to this. Kind of looked similar, retested the trend, and then we pushed right through it. So something to consider, but looking at that trend as your first major resistance. If it rejects from there, that's going to be terrible. And then you'd be looking for at least a retest of that 200, sitting at 18,157. And then looking at the shorter time frames, again, similar setup. Looks a bit like a bear flag. Grinding price action continues to look short-term bullish, looking to grind this level. Hit that 144. Your next level would be 461.55. Looking at that zone as resistance. We found resistance here at the bottom of this previous consolidation. Did push into it a little bit. If CPI comes in good, I think we're going to wick these levels and then we'll get the continuation lower. But markets are still waiting for that data and the catalyst move that will follow it, in my opinion. Moving over to the 4-hour on the Tasty charts here, you can see that ATR resistance is still at 462.76, continues to be flat at the highs from this previous consolidation that we just talked about. Again, momentum, short-term bullish, not a ton of volume, finding resistance at that 34 EMA, which is at 459.41, watching that zone closely. Once this starts to break, though, I think there's going to be a lot of momentum, a lot of follow-through, so something to watch. If you're playing this to the bull side right now, like I am, be very careful and get ready to take off all of those bull trades once this starts to top out. Again, I think there's one more day, maybe a catalyst style push into this zone, and then that bigger move down. The lowest ATR band there is at 442.54. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, you can see the Russell threw a big wick down to that 144 EMA at 206.17. Momentum still bearish, RSI still bearish. Didn't see the continuation that other markets did. It's falling a little bit after hours. Just being patient here, waiting to see what happens. It did hold the level at 208.22, and after hours, even that slight fall is still holding the level. Again, going to be super critical to see what happens on that inflation data. If it breaks here, we're probably going back to these previous lows in the 200 at 202.47, but it hasn't done it quite yet, and that wick rejection actually gives me a little bit more confidence to the bull side. And then looking at the Dow here, you can see 0.19 to the downside, still holding this consolidation range, 21 EMA sitting in there at 408.01. Closing price was 408.26, so still holding here, momentum slightly bearish, RSI slightly bearish. Moving over to the Mag 7, still in this range here, so we can't get above this upper trend. We've tested it a ton of times. Lowest trend continues to hold, tested that here today. Momentum stepped to bullish, again looking to test that RSI tomorrow, then we'll see what happens there. If we get one more test and this rejects out of it, we're headed to that 200, which is going to be down at 241.43, so critical zone there. Again, I have an overall bearish thesis, so looking for that rejection. Right now, it still looks okay for one more test, which is up around the 260.50 level. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft. Apple still holding the level, 217.61, still in the middle of this consolidation. That's 3 wicks now to that zone, and it continues to hold. So you have to look at that as a potential bullish structure. There continues to be demand in there. People are buying the Apple stock in that zone, even after their Apple even after their iPhone day, which was basically a nothing burger. Momentum and RSI still bearish, but still holding that critical support 217.62. And then look at Microsoft here, good 2% up day. Right to the 21, broke the level, 413.36. Kind of have to look at this as a low, potentially higher low setup now, which is interesting. Let's go ahead and give it a little bit of structure, kind of like this. Big move up, kind of a bull flag maybe. It is pulling back really strongly for a bull flag. You would want to see it kind of tighter, not dip as low. It almost reached the previous low here, down around that 398.40 area, but momentum back to bullish. RSI broken back above the SMA, so that's a pretty bullish indicator. Looks like that SMA might start to swing back to the bull side a little bit. That could be interesting. Microsoft looking pretty decent off of that up day, especially with the swing back to bullish momentum. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA, starting with Tesla here, you can see big up day, 4.5%. We had a bullish thesis on this, good push. Next level is 232.57. That was the previous pivot point on this up move. I think we're going to push through that this time. This is a clean breakout now of this uptrend, retest, continuation. Looks good, momentum bullish, RSI bullish. So Tesla continues to look pretty good here over the next day or two. And then looking at NVIDIA, not super great. It was positive 1.5%, but that could just be being carried by markets with a slightly bullish day. Held the level 106.64 after testing it at the end of the session yesterday, so it did have a little bit of a move. 9 EMA sitting as resistance at 111.27. Not super sold on this. Honestly, if you wanted to try to play it as kind of a sideways choppy market, and this is a short-term low, I think you could. That would give you some trend resistance up around 115.30. If that breaks, your next level is 124.69. Similar to this move here, just with a lower top in it at that 21 EMA, potentially at 118.37. So I guess if you're looking for that kind of a move, there's definitely some trade in there. Somewhere between 7.5%, maybe 8.5%. Momentum, 2 steps to bullish, so that looks good. Starting to see that continuation there. RSI still has that resistance at the SMA to watch for. Moving over to Amazon and Google. Amazon 2.3% to the upside, very close to the resistance, 181.41. Critical zone there. If it pushes through, you're probably headed to the 188.61 level, but definitely some important levels there. Bullish momentum, bullish RSI. Amazon continuing to come off this big rally, double bottom type setup. Couldn't break down from here, higher low, looking bullish. And then looking at Google here, tried to retrace, couldn't do it. Momentum still bearish. RSI still super oversold, but still do not like this setup. I would definitely be patient if you're trying to get long here. It did not close above the 150.26 level, despite getting all the way up to 152.30, gave all of that back, continues to look bearish for me. My price target is still the 143.82 level. Moving over to staples and discretionaries. Staples basically flat, continues to hover. We did get a new wick high, but not on a closing basis. Momentum basically flat, RSI basically flat and overbought. Still a rocket ship, so I wouldn't bet against it, but we don't have clear direction as we continue to find resistance in this 183.60 zone. And then looking at discretionary, continues to find a little bit of a bullish push. We pushed right through the level here, 185.36, right through the trend line there as well. And then your next price target is that 189.38 area. It's finding resistance in this previous consolidation top, but after hours getting a little bit more push. I actually like this setup. Looks very similar to the Amazon setup. Moving over to oil and gas and industrials. 7 days in a row of bearish price action here on oil and gas. You do not see that super often. Tested that trend line here, overthrew the level at 128. Your next level is 124.13. We are testing these lows here. Once it breaks through that, there is a lot of room here to these previous lows. Doesn't mean we can't find a little bit of support in here, but we've been in this zone before. Could absolutely go down to that 116.64 area. Continues to be a falling knife. Continue to be patient there. It will find a bottom. The question is when. And then looking at industrials, just to follow through on those charts from yesterday. Did get a slight update, 0.17, momentum step to bullish, RSI still below the SMA, really no change to that setup. Short-term bullish, looking for a test of that 9 EMA at 128.54. Moving over to Riot and Mara, haven't talked about these in a while because they've looked pretty awful, but we actually got a positive day yesterday, and we did get a second day push here today. Momentum swinging to bullish, probably has a little bit more in the tank. 9% day on Mara, 21 EMA as resistance at 16.12, waiting to see what happens there. If it gets through that, 1878 is your next level. Similarly here with ROIT, just looking for a test of that 21 at $7.60. Moving over to Breadth, inside candle, nothing crazy. Momentum still bearish, RSI still bearish. So Breadth not really going with that up move that we got today. Again, indicating that this is a short-term rally, relief rally, still expecting more downside. Like I said before, I think the 20-day is going to push into that 30 to 36 zone down here. At least test the 36 level, and then we'll see what happens after that. So still expecting more downside. 50-day retesting that trend here. Slightly bearish day there as well. Momentum has not changed. Moving over to the dollar. Dollar is kind of in this consolidation here now, waiting for CPI tomorrow. The daily chart still very bullish with a low, higher low setup. Still like that. Momentum still bullish. Still looking for a 102 test. Needs to break this midpoint here on that double bottom / higher low setup, depending on how you're looking at it. Looking for that higher high to come. Still like the dollar as a bullish setup. Moving over to bonds, you can see J&K, slight bearish day. 0.22 did get back below the level, so this looks like a bit of a consolidation, double top now, doesn't look super great. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. TLT on the other hand continues to be very strong, pushed right through the level, closed above my 100 level finally, tested that trend line, continues to be interesting. Needs to push through that up to 102.50 if it's going to do it. Momentum bullish, RSI still bullish, but this is a critical point going into CPI. Makes sense for markets to hesitate right at those critical levels, and then CPI is going to determine if this pushes through or if it rejects from here and goes back to the next trend down around that 98.50 area. Moving over to the VIX, testing that 9 EMA, still in this consolidation. Again, CPI comes in good for markets. This is going to push lower. If it doesn't, this is going to spike up. Critical zone here, continuing to watch that 1850 level. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I managed to make a little bit of money there. I ended up selling a put, rolled it out to tomorrow for 207 for a $1.30 credit. Just being cautious on the IWM. It didn't look super great today with that big dip down, so just being cautious. Ended up losing just a few dollars. Nothing crazy. Still think that it could bounce. Either way, looking for a $1.30 on that. And then looking at the Qs here, looks super bullish. I did roll out to tomorrow for $5. Deep in the money there at 458.66. It's falling just a little bit after hours at 457.97 right now, but either way, deep in the money. Probably going to let those shares go depending on how markets look. And then I have these puts here, just one put at 457 for $2 credit. Remember, being super cautious. I'll probably look to take that put off, especially if the CPI is bad and starts to crater markets. I'll take all of these bullish positions off and probably play it to the downside with selling some calls, maybe even get into some short shares if we get that continuation style move. So slightly bullish going into tomorrow's session, being cautious for that continuation down move. Let me know down in the comments section what you think the inflation data is going to do to markets. And will it have any impact on the rate cut at this point? Do you think 50 basis points is possible or not? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.